Guys, Mustached Tom here, to do a script doctor sort of video on the short video All in Good Time, which was written by Mauler of Efap fame or infamy, depending on how you look at them. But this video will be focused in on how to improve what is here, which may include how to add elements that are not present, which does mean changing the film. But that is something that I do think that good critique should offer, are elements to, again, improve any given work. So, with that being said, one of the elements I sort of briefly went over in my initial review was that our opening segment of the boss character dealing with these individuals is very much comes across as trying to achieve some sort of shock value, mayhaps, by having the boss proceed to kill the individuals. The downside to this is that sort of their value as characters are placed on the boss's perspective. As a writer, you have to think that life and death, and more so death in a lot of instances, that, you know, you can look over a character's death, i.e. look at Joel from The Last of Us 2, right? But you can also massively over-succeed in doing something of a character death, i.e. Glenn from The Walking Dead. One of the best removals of a character. It was so good that it actually hurt the story, because it followed so closely to what happened. But I digress in saying that obviously you want to try, if you're a writer, to achieve, if you are aiming to have a character kill another, to achieve the latter example by having the character have that much more impact. Now, one thing that The Walking Dead excelled at previously was building up these characters before that moment even arrives. Now, given that this is a short film, that window is obviously a lot more condensed, which means you have to do a lot more work in a shorter period of time to achieve the same outcome. With that, having these brief flashbacks can serve as a sort of small window into each character before they're killed. And I say before because I am aware, at least in the psychological space, that if you kill an individual in your script and then give them backstory like Metal Gear, I believe that was 4 that did that, or yeah, I think it's 4 that did that, that the space that you have the capacity to care for, it is diluted by the death. So by preloading before the gun is shot is often preferable, again, from a psychological standpoint. That is, if you want to give characters meat on their bones before you remove them from the equation, which I would argue this movie is in desperate need of. Meat. Something to chew on, something to absorb. These elements could definitely fill in that space. And especially more so for our two main characters. And I'll get to that in just a moment here, but point being is that up until we get the one-on-one equation, having these little moments to set up these other characters for as briefly as they are in the movie can serve to do quite a bit of character work. As it does come across, the character work actually can't even start until all the other, and I'm going to put it in quotes for the time being, characters are killed off. Until it's the two remaining, that being the boss and the worker guy. So, that is one way to fulfill that meat, is to give the character work via these flashbacks. And, in doing so with the main character, what that can also stand to do is not only add meat onto his character, because his character is insanely flat. The only thing I can think to say about that character is he seems to not fear death. I think. But, and again, if you were to prepare, say if you knew this was coming in advance, which seems to be the implication I think this short animated, or not animated, but short film is going for. And one thing that this can do, because of how open and vague it is, the smoke portion of it, the end section of this movie, can come across as something a bit more mystical in nature. You're leaving yourself open to that opportunity or that window for people to sort of wonder how that even happened. And this seems to be a script that seems to be trying to be grounded in realism, so obviously you want to avoid such windows into such possibilities. And one way to avoid doing that is to show the main character prepping for this type of situation. Maybe we see him briefly build up a chip, and we don't even have to see him complete it or put it on the back of his neck. We can now make the connection for ourselves, but there is no connective bridge as of this, as it is written. And again, that leaves the door open. But I digress. It also doubles up, though, that's the thing of why I suggest it. It adds to the character that we are now following. It tells us that he is someone who does prepare for such situations, that he knows that something bad is going to happen. This is a good way to inform by showing us that he's preparing, not telling us. You don't need dialogue in these moments, by the way. These short little glimpses can definitely give us a whole slew of information. Again, visual storytelling is something that is very crucial, which I'm sure that I could tell Mauler's somewhat aware of. He does use the water glass cup there as a sort of way to reflect time. That much is clear, so I don't see why he doesn't apply that to actual character work. That baffles me. But I digress. So that's how you can improve upon the characters. In terms of the boss, now this might increase the movie's length by a little bit, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. By adding flashbacks to the boss in relationships to each character, now what you do is you're having these versus flashbacks, right? The flashbacks of the characters, if you were to take on that, that prompt, that gives us a glimpse into the character and humbles us to that character, sympathizes, any number of those things. And when we're given the boss's perspective, you can flip it. You can make him, why would he come to that conclusion the conclusions he gets to, right? We can get those types of glimpses. So, a pre-shot flashback and then a post-shot flashback from his perspective. Do it that way, maybe you can get a full window of each given character, and these two should obviously then, by that very proxy, share one, as that would just be a nice little button, as it were, to conclude this sort of framework. And with that is one of the crucial things that this script is missing, as I had alluded to, is, again, that meat, that character work. Because, as I had mentioned, there is just this sense of vagary to things. And now, with the flashbacks, you can attach, these animals that are referenced in the middle sort of portion of their dialogue to something, rather than them just being sort of vague gestures to animals, because that is how that reads, unfortunately, when he brings up all these animals that he can be compared to. Because alone, the representation could mean anything, right? I mean, people have pretty interesting imaginations when it comes to animal representation. If you don't know, then mayhaps you might want to do some research into, look at movies like Zootopia, or Zootopia 2 in this case, because I know the snake is referenced. So yeah, these are all things that you can sort of play around with in terms of, now each of them has a placeholder. Now each can be attached to a very specific thing, rather than, again, being too vague as it stands now. Because the reading could go in any which way. That's the thing about writing and scripting and putting together something like this, is that people can take away a lot from any given thing. But if you're trying to achieve, say, a more certain goal, in this case, mayhaps this attempt at whatever this mention of time is. I mean, sure, we have a clock shot at the tail end of the time, but maybe we can make that more of a motif throughout the entire context of it. In each given flashback, maybe there is a reference to time in one way or another. Again, either it could be visual or spoken about. More likely visual than spoken about, if you're trying to maintain that sort of unprompted sort of exposition that is on the nose, again, while also, again, adding the meat that is, again, I would argue is necessary for this movie to be of any worthwhile. And the last element I would say, because each of these flashbacks, again, I would probably, if you were to count it, 2 and 2, you're probably looking at an additional few minutes, 10 minutes, depending. That isn't that much time if you really think about it. And just on a smaller note, though I would argue it's actually quite bigger because of, again, visual storytelling, and this is more on the director's issue than the writer, but after the first shot is initiated, you would, I mean, as the director, I would argue you would want tell the actors to act a lot more freaked out than they behave when this is occurring. And now, what you can do with the bigger freaking out is you can have the character that is going to be maintained, who lives up until a certain point, the final guy, have him not freaking out. That now tells us something about his character versus everybody else's. Now he stands out. It's not just a mystery. There's something that we're already be given context way earlier, before any dialogue is spoken. Now we are given something visually to be hooked onto. So there's that in terms of like just visual performance. Again, that can tell us a lot about character, so I would argue that that isn't quite a nitpick, actually quite a missed opportunity, if anything. And with that, since the story is so short, I do think that that is as much as I can conceivably script doctor this script as it is, which I think is fair. So that is my attempt to script doctor this film. This is in hopes that, maybe he might not ever see it, but I'm always of the opinion of, even if I hard disagree with a YouTuber, that any YouTuber or filmmaker worth their way in trying to make it in the big leagues can improve. That is why I do what I do, after all. But this can also be a good listen for anyone who else may be listening, to think about ways to incorporate in basic writing, character work, pacing, all of these elements that can often go overlooked in this sense, to create a much more dynamic situation than what is being presented to here. So there we go. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, me becoming a script doctor, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you to my petition about small YouTubers, second to my PayPal. You can help support me and my channel directly, and third to my Discord server. You can join collab, share, all do that cool stuff for free, and until next time everyone, bye bye.